Greatest unsolved mysteries often get forgotten over the years. Even the solved ones are still yet to be fully understood. In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, specifically in Ecuador, lies a cave that could hold historical records of the past. Whether this is true or not, let's take a closer look at the catalyst that sparked immense interest in the Los Tayos caves back in the 1970s. The Amazon rainforest is the world's largest rainforest. It is a vast biome that spans 8 South American countries. In the depths of the rainforest live tribes who had no contact with the outside world. There are an estimated more than 100 isolated tribes who live in Brazil, but there are many more that can be found in Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Colombia as well. Through oral history and messages passed down from generation to generation, indigenous people learned to fear outsiders, which is why so many sections of the Amazon have stayed hidden through history. Eastern slopes of the Andes Mountains in the Morona Santiago province of Ecuador, there lies a cave called the Cueva de los Tallos, which translates in English to Cave of the Oilbirds. It has 3 entrances, but the largest consists of a 65-meter deep shaft leading to around 4.6 kilometers of passages and also chambers. The cave is home to fledgling oilbirds, a brown nocturnal bird that is the favorite food of the indigenous Shuar people. They brave the depths of the cave system by using handmade vine ladders and bamboo torches to collect the oilbirds. References to the cave date back to the 1860s, and it is known that it was visited by gold prospectors and the Ecuadorian military personnel in the 1960s. Father Carlos Crespi Croce was a priest stationed in Cuenca, Ecuador. During his time there, he was able to collect thousands of different artifacts. The majority were authentic, others were counterfeit, and then some given to him by the Shuar natives. He ended up collecting so many artifacts that he founded the Carlos Crespi Croce Museum in Cuenca, with the goal of displaying and storing them in the museum. Of the Shuar and pre-Shuar artifacts, only a few photographs and video remain, since most of them were sold and others were stolen in a fire that occurred in 1962. Many of the objects that were stored in the museum and that were in Crespi's possession were said to originate from the Los Tayos cave. After his death in 1982, the artifacts unfortunately disappeared from the museum. Los Tayos cave was in relative obscurity for the majority of the early 19th century. It wasn't until Juan Morich's claims about gold, ancient sculptures, and a metallic library hidden inside the cave that it was shoved into the spotlight. Originally from Hungary, Moritz moved to Argentina after World War II and eventually moved to Ecuador in 1964 to help survey the Ecuadorian jungle on behalf of various mining companies. Eventually, as he worked closely in the jungle, he came into contact with the Shuar people. Moritz observed the Shuar people entering the cave to fetch oilbirds. He subsequently asked for permission to enter, and eventually they allowed him to enter their cave systems. He ended up discovering one of the most mysterious caves in the world. He claimed to have entered La Cueva de los Tallos and discovered a myriad of artifacts, sculptures, and even gold. He also claimed to have seen a metallic library containing metallic tablets, but upon attempting to read the tablets, he couldn't understand the language that was inscribed. Juan Morich's account of the things he had seen in the cave would have been forever lost if it had not been for Erich von Daniken, a Swiss author who published The Gold of the Gods in 1971, which recounted Juan Morich's account of what he had discovered in the Cueva de los Tallos back in 1969. Von Daniken's book brought newfound attention and interest in the Cueva de los Tallos. It brought so much interest that the first major scientific expedition to the cave was organized 5 years after the publication of the book. In 1974, the Scottish civil engineer Stan Hall proposed to the Ecuadorian government a joint Ecuadorian-British expedition to La Cueva de los Tallos. Eventually, in 1976, the expedition was approved, and with Stan Hall's leadership, it quickly grew to over 100 people being involved. The expedition consisted of leading scientists, speleologists, British and Ecuadorian government officials, and British Special Forces, as well as professional cavers, film crews, and even former American astronaut Neil Armstrong. On July 21st, 1969, Neil Armstrong made history by becoming the first man to walk on the moon. But what has remained a mystery to many people is Armstrong's journey to Ecuador in his search to find La Cueva de los Tallos. Armstrong had heard about the claims of a library that was supposedly hidden in a cave in the Ecuadorian jungle, and he immediately boarded a plane to Ecuador at the head of a huge, well-funded expedition determined to uncover the truth about Maruch's cave. Once the expedition team was assembled, they were brought to the site by helicopter, and they descended into the depths of the cave. The 8 experienced British cavers that were part of their team mapped the cavern for them. They explored the cave and they produced a detailed map of the chambers that it contained. But even though they were thorough in their search, all they saw were completely natural cave formations. They were unable to locate the library, the gold, and the unusual sculptures that Maruch had mentioned. At that point, it seemed as though Maruch's claims were made up in an effort to gain notoriety. Although the expedition wasn't a complete failure, as they were able to make interesting zoological discoveries as well as archaeological findings related to the caves used by the local Shuar people. The lead researcher in the expedition was also not convinced that Maruch had simply made the whole thing up. So he met up with Maruch's indigenous source, who claimed that they had investigated the wrong cave and that the real cave was secret. Unfortunately, to this date, no one has found the real location of the cave described by Maruch's indigenous source. That's going to be the end of it. I would love to hear your theories and any possible explanations you have about the cave down in the comments below. I'll be posting these types of videos every week on YouTube, so stay tuned for it, and I'll see you next time.